Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Two Plain Sports. Today is Friday, February 17th, and OU had a big media day. Opened up the cameras and opened up pretty much everyone to the media, which is something that we're not overly used to, especially with the previous staff with Lincoln Riley and his rules. And then even before with Bob Stoops, Bob Stoops didn't open up true freshmen to this camera style and this media access and things like that. I think it's good. There are some reasons why you might want to hide a freshman or two here and there, but I guess at the end of the day, when you recruit someone and Venables trusts the guys that he's bringing on campus, you don't have anything to hide. So I totally understand why you're doing that. I think it's pretty cool because it gets a lot of insight. So on today's video, we're going to be talking about Venables' press conference. We're going to be talking about some individual interviews from incoming players that are on campus now, some of their reactions, their comments. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Keon Brown rumor that's floating around that seems like it has no substance to it. We're going to be talking about also Seth Latrell, and then a 2025 defensive back put OU in his top four, which it's hard to even believe. 2025. I mean, we're at nearly 2 years away from actually putting pen to paper. So, take it with a grain of salt. But the fact that 2025 is on the radar, I think is pretty great. So we'll just hop into Venables' conference and talk about that. So obviously Venables had his press conference today, talked about, turning the page pretty much. Let's get the ball rolling. It seems like I don't want to say that there's more focus this year than last year, but I also think that him and everyone else on the staff and on this team, they're more settled and not quite as rushed, and they are prepared. Jose, what are some of your takeaways from his press conference and his thoughts on the team and what's been happening the last year plus?
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a different hunger, like a bigger chip on the shoulder. Using typical uh, vernacular for what the situation is after having a bad season, being at Oklahoma. No one wants to be in that situation, and the coaches, specifically Venables, seems to be that much more ready for what it takes to be a head coach. I mean, it was his first season. For what it takes to be the Oklahoma head coach, how to prepare his players, so on and so forth. I think one of the biggest takeaways is just the sheer amount of turnover from the moment he got hired to now, including the signees. There was 76 scholarship players for the Alamo Bowl, and 53 of them are gone. They're no longer on the roster now, and there could still be another wave of transfer portal. Maybe a couple more guys enter. I'm not saying that it's 100% the case, but they could still leave after the spring, just like Oklahoma can add on after the spring. But that's still something there's only 23 guys left since 14 months ago, which is crazy to think, because that just shows how much production was really lost. Experience on the actual field, even if they weren't high production players, just guys that understood the pressure that it took, and the preparation that they needed to take to be on the field at this high a level of football. So clearly there was some catching up to do, and I think we all noticed that last year watching the games. There was just a lot of mental errors because there were a lot of newer players that were starting for the first time, or having significant first time they're having significant snaps for the team. Overall, I think that what he highlighted in the questions that were asked of him. I'm excited about the Big 12 last year. He did mention the SEC, but it's tough to know for him. It was tough for him to answer a lot of those questions because a lot of the questions were like preparing for the SEC, and there's not a lot that he can do at this exact moment to prepare for the SEC because he still has one more season on the Big 12, and their focus is on next season, not in 2 years when they're going up against whoever, because that schedule is not released. They don't know how that schedule is formatting. Is it going to be 8 conference games? Is it going to be 9? how many out of conference games. They they don't have that stuff yet, so it wasn't like easy for him to answer it, but he answered it to the best of his ability. When he talked about all the players, he was, as expected, pretty high on all of them. What stood out is when he talked about Peyton Bowen getting him some looks at the cheetah position, not just keeping him at safety, which is interesting. I think he would be more of kind of like, not to say that he would have the Justin Harrington effect, and that would be his play style, but he'd probably be more cheetah when it comes to if we're playing a high-powered passing offense. If Deshaun shows that maybe he's just better at staying in the front, rushing the passer, stopping the run, which I don't think that'll be the case. I think they're just trying to put Peyton in a position to get on the field as quickly as possible, which is good. You want to try to get these guys, especially with the transfer portal being a thing now. You want to make sure that they see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that they're not just stuck on the depth chart, not ever going to see the field. These younger guys want to make sure they're going to be on the field sooner rather than later. You mentioned Jackson Arnold. A lot of people, I think, maybe overreacted to his comments about Jackson. What he did say was that he's working hard, learning the playbook every moment he can. He's in the weight room when he's got extra time. He's studying film. So dude is doing everything he can to make sure that the coaches notice that he can be ready if need be by next fall. That, who knows what the case will be. I think it's still pretty safe to assume that Dylan Gabriel is going to be the starting quarterback, but it's good to hear that your incoming freshman quarterback, the guy that a lot of fans are excited about, is doing everything he can to put himself in a position to be successful sooner rather than later. Mentioned, the defensive line, building the trenches, turnover there. I mean, really overall, it really seems like he's focused, but he focused on filling in the weak spots of the team, which for the most part was a lot of the plays on the field. But and wide receivers weren't really a weak spot, but he made sure there was more depth there. Defensive backs were improving, but I mentioned he expects that group to be much better because he lost a lot of bodies, but not a lot of production. So he's got guys in the depth chart now that can maybe be more productive than when he had. Linebackers, a lot of returning guys. In the front, he's got some returning guys and a lot of guys that are coming from the transfer portal that have experience playing on the football field already at the collegiate level. So seems like his focus was in the right place, and he's excited about what they're going to do next fall. It's just going to be, putting it together. Kind of gave some important dates. I think it's like 32 days from when you guys are watching this or from when this video is released is when spring football starts for them. So when they start putting on pads and all that stuff. And the spring game is 64 days away, if I remember correctly. So it's going to come at them fast, and he wants to make sure these guys are prepared just like last year.
Football's going to be back before we know it, which is even harder for me to even believe. I mean, the national championship's been played over a month ago at this point. And it feels like it just happened yesterday. Just goes to show how fast everything moves in the world of college football now and college athletics with the transfer portal, and it's becoming a year-round sport, just like the NFL is trying to become, and it basically is. Another thing I think about what Venables coming into last year, he didn't have quite as much roster turnover. You talked about he lost, or Oklahoma lost 53 guys. Going into last season, they definitely didn't lose 53 before the start of last season. So he still had quite a few players from that Alamo Bowl. And I think he struggled. He probably had some good buy-in from, a lot of the team, but you always still have some of the older guys, maybe I'm not going to say bad apples, but guys that are older, more set in their ways and not, they know what they know, and that's the way it's going to go. Now that they're able to kind of flush most of that out, they've got majority of the team as fresh and young or coming into the program. They can set the precedent. I think you're going to see even more of a buy-in. They can now use last year's season as bulletin board material because Venables came into this team and they won 10 games in the regular in the Alamo Bowl. They won 10 games. So, I mean, they won 10 or 11. I can't remember. Maybe it was 11. I know they won the Alamo Bowl. They lost 2 in the regular season. So it's 11. But still, so you come in and you're like, well, that's not good enough. And you're like, we won 11 games last year. It's a little bit harder. But now he's like, well, we went, 6-7. It's got to be a lot better now. So you've got a little bit more of, while last year sucked, I think, and now he can prove that we have to do this because of this. And you got new guys, and I think that's pretty good. As far as Jackson Arnold, yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's going in, he's like truly going to compete, and I think they're going to give him an honest, a fair shake at starting next fall. I don't believe that'll happen, but what he's doing is he's being the leader of that 23 class that's already there, and the rest of the kids that will come in June, setting the tone of these incoming freshmen. Like, this is what we're going to do. If I'm doing it, you're doing it. Starting them, young, and then especially setting it up for success in 2024 when you bring in that new class. That precedent will already be set. Dylan Gabriel will be gone, and Jackson Arnold will take over the reins, and he will have already molded his class and his work ethic, and then be able to set up for 24, and then all the other kids, all the transfers and everything else. And most of probably the remaining scholarship players will be flushed out from the Alamo Bowl after this season. So it's a growing process, or growing pains. I think, we talked about getting ready for the SEC. We've been talking about that for a few years now. It doesn't happen overnight. Roster turnover doesn't happen overnight. It happens faster now with the transfer portal. It used to take 3 or 4 years. Now you can do it in about 2. But it still takes time, and it takes time to build that culture. And I think they've got the things rolling that they should. They've got their ducks in a row, and I think you're going to see a great improvement. Now, as far as individual players, Reggie Pearson, I watched his interview because I was interested, because he was, been at Wisconsin and went to Tech, then went to Oklahoma. They were asking him basically the main differences between the, workout regimen that Schmidt's doing with them. And he basically said it's different as in just not the same it's just totally different than Tech and Wisconsin, probably just the workout styles and things like that. He was asked about the young incoming defensive backs, said they're freakishly athletic. And then he was asked, why Oklahoma? And he said, because it's Oklahoma and Coach BV. And who wouldn't want to come play for him? And he said, to be honest, coming out of high school, Oklahoma wouldn't have ever even looked at me. The fact that Oklahoma looked at me now, it goes to show that Oklahoma is an elite program, and I get an opportunity to play at the University of Oklahoma. He's kind of treated as like a privilege, and something that he's very, very thankful for. And it's that mindset. I know you watched some Dasan McCullough and a few others. What do you think?
Yeah, so starting with Dasan, I think the biggest thing I took away is how excited he is about playing for Venables. Called him the best linebacker coach in the country, which I'm sure some other fan bases would argue, but Dasan, from his experience, he says that's what he believes, and you got to believe that when you think that of your coach, he's going to play that much harder and going to be that much more prepared and listen to what Venables has to say. Hear the feedback and apply it as soon as he can. Talk about just kind of, his recruiting process, which we talked about whenever they did him and his younger brother Day committed. How it was pretty quick. The relationship that they already had with the coaches on staff, getting to campus pretty quickly, committing. But he also mentioned like how it's nice to have those transfer guys come in with him and kind of piggyback from their experiences and learn and kind of rely on each other to get to assimilate into the existing locker room, right? It's kind of like what Rondell said. It's not like, they're excited about it as transfers. They're older guys, so they know what it's like to be a college athlete. So it's really just acclimating into this system, to this football team, and figuring out like where they're going to fit in and play in the fall. Peyton Bowen and Jackson Arnold, watch theirs as well. Peyton Bowen, main takeaway there is how little people actually knew about his recruiting process and the commitment, the infamous commitment date and how all that went down. So to recap it real quick, essentially the day he committed to Oregon, we all know that the lines of communication were not closed with Oklahoma and Notre Dame. He actually committed and signed to Oklahoma that night silently, had told no one, that not even his best friend Jackson Arnold. Jackson called him around midnight to try to give him this big spiel about why he should be at Oklahoma. And before Jackson could even start, he told him that he said, quote, "I'm booming," saying, telling him in his own way, "I'm already signed to Oklahoma and it'll all be public tomorrow." So that just goes to show how good he was at keeping things close to him and making sure none of it got leaked, because it was only the information that he wanted out. Pretty easy now with the internet, how people have sources, to kind of get all that stuff ruined for him if someone really wanted to be the first to break that kind of information. But he kept it close. No one really knew until the morning that he switched his commitment from Oregon to Oklahoma, and the rest is history. Like, I respect it. I know people were frustrated at the time, but at the end of the day, it's his experience. He went about it the way that he felt was best for him, and not even his best friend knew what was happening, which just shows how much he needed to take time personally and figure out what was going to be the move for him. And it ended up working for Oklahoma, and sounds like he's excited about his opportunity to be a Sooner.
And it just goes to show that, while we want the staff to take commitments immediately, the persistence and the relentlessness when it comes to recruiting and trusting what Oklahoma has to offer ultimately wins out. And it did in this case. I mean, it doesn't for every recruit, but I think we're going to see Oklahoma win more recruits than they lose out on. And you're just bound to lose recruits, whoever you are. It doesn't matter if you're Alabama or University of Tulsa, you're bound to lose recruits throughout the process. I mean, you can't win everything. So,
and with like insider stuff, right? I mean, trust who you want to trust. If it's, Boone and Drum, who we think do a great job, if it's us with the information that we give you, or any other guys you watch. Just at the end of the day, these are people that we're trying to cover, and people are unpredictable, and they can change their minds in a second to something else that no one knew about. So at the end of the day, they're predictions, and with information that is given to them and to us, and we can only do so much. Can't get these guys to give us everything up to date by the second.
No, that's very true. So moving on to information, another topic with some information is 2023 4-star, wide receiver Keon Brown. There's been a rumor, he signed to Oklahoma. There's a rumor floating around on the Bird app, Twitter, or whatever, that Keon Brown is going to request a release from his national letter of intent to Oklahoma. And later this afternoon, or Thursday evening, he posted a picture of him at Oklahoma saying, "I know where home is," basically squashing all the noise. Seemed like it came out of left field. He squashed it pretty easily. I think it's odd and bizarre. And, obviously Jaden Rashada, that whole ordeal, but there hasn't been a lot of people that have requested a release from the NIL or NLI. And we obviously know why Rashada left his deal at Florida. I think it's bizarre. I think he squashed it. I don't think there's really any worry. I don't think people should be sounding the alarm. I mean, we could be posting about stuff that people are going to be requesting from their national letter of intent, and we could have no idea. And I feel like that's what a lot of accounts, you were talking about who you trust.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's, I don't know why someone would want to get that rumor started. I don't know why, maybe they just got really bad information and got duped. I doubt it. Or this really just seems like want to stir the pot. The only other player that I've seen request releases is basketball players that were committed to Notre Dame. And it was because of the Bray potential was going to retire, and I saw that now he's not going to retire. Who knows what that situation is over there? At the end of the day, for the most part, when kids sign that letter, they're committed to that school. Keon Brown, same boat. Don't listen to every rumor that you hear. You don't need to freak out. Hopefully, people weren't too worried about it and concerned. I didn't see too much about it. Just saw a couple of tweets, and Keon kind of set the record straight as soon as he could, because he's been committed to Oklahoma for a long time, and that's a guy that, thinking back to when he committed verbally, he had gotten his offer, went to a camp, and committed within like a week of getting his offer. So it was one that was quick, so one that definitely could have gone away from Oklahoma during the entire recruitment process, but he was bought into OU. He was bought into catching balls from Jackson Arnold. He was bought into Lebby. So really, any of the guys that after signing their letter of intent with Oklahoma, I would not really ever believe any of these kids wanting to be released from that letter.
I agree. I think someone's just stirring the pot and wanting attention at this point. This would be bizarre, but at the end of the day, crazy things happen. But I think it's just a rumor with no substance behind it. So, moving on to another topic, Oklahoma and maybe Seth Latrell. Does Seth Latrell join the staff as potentially as an offensive analyst for Oklahoma? For anyone that doesn't know who Seth Latrell is, he is the former head coach of North Texas. He coached there for 7 seasons, went 44-44. He got fired mainly because of going 0-5 in bowl games as their head coach. But in his defense, he inherited North Texas when they were 1-11. I don't know if you remember when Mason Fine played for North Texas. He tore it up, threw up tons of stats. He's from Locust Grove here in Oklahoma. Latrell is an Oklahoma alumni, played running back for OU, won a national championship with OU. His dad played at OU. He's from Muskogee, has a lot of Oklahoma ties, obviously. A great offensive mind. If anyone who doesn't know Mason Fine, his stats were insane. I know it's Conference USA, but looking at this, Latrell was let go of his, obviously let go. He's going to look for another job. He's been linked to some offensive coordinator positions at various schools. But if Oklahoma lands Latrell to me projects as someone that could eventually fill the shoes of Jeff Lebby, and someone that knows how to call an offense, knows obviously Oklahoma, and very familiar with at least BV. I know he didn't play when, a whole lot with BV considering his offense, but that's fine. I think he'd be a slam dunk hire. It's just a matter of, can you convince him, if another school comes calling for an offensive coordinator job, can you convince him to be an analyst here, and in the hopes of Lebby leaving and filling his shoes? Because there's no guarantees, even if Lebby leaves, that Latrell would get the job. I mean, there's going to be other people that will be vying for this. What do you think?
It would be a great hire, and it's kind of the Oklahoma coaching staff and staff overall is kind of shaping to be what top programs are when it comes to hiring analysts and hiring assistants. If you look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, they always bring back guys that either have connections to the school or were failed head coaches at other programs, and kind of trying to rebuild their coaching career with an experienced staff. Look at Alabama. They took a lot of these guys from failed initial opportunities as head coaches, brought them in as analysts, worked their way up to being assistants, either position assistants or offensive coordinators, and then got jobs and moved on to the new head coaching opportunity, and now look pretty good as head coaches. Lane Kiffin being one that comes to the top of my head initially. Didn't have the greatest stints as head coach initially, was the OC for Alabama, and then got a better, it now looks like a pretty competent head coach and is a funny Twitter follow. Oklahoma, I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't think it's fair to compare anyone to what Alabama and Nick Saban have been able to do with coaches, but that's essentially what it seems like Oklahoma is trying to do, bringing in guys that have experience at somewhere else, bringing in that experience so that everyone can learn from it, and then they can learn from what hopefully is breeding success at Oklahoma and where these coaches have had success at other places, and moving on to the next opportunity. If it's not climbing the ladder at Oklahoma, then going on being position coaches elsewhere, or offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators elsewhere, and eventually being head coaches. Like, it's trying to, what good leaders do, just trying to mold both their players and their coaches to become better versions, get promotions. And that's something that we haven't seen at Oklahoma in a while. And I think it's promising, because that's when you're going to start getting the best out of coaches and players.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about it. I mean, Matt Wells is there, and you bring in a guy like Seth Latrell and various other guys. There's a lot of upward mobility for these guys, and they have the opportunities to be developed and then go elsewhere. And while it's kind of it's a catch-22, while you want to develop these guys, but you don't want them to leave. But at the end of the day, if other schools are calling for these guys, means Oklahoma's doing something right. I mean, that's why Nick Saban loses his offense and defensive coordinators like every year or every other year. It seems it's because they win all the time, and who doesn't want that? I mean, and eventually you get a guy like Kirby Smart, who is a home run slam dunk, and you turn into a powerhouse yourself.
Yeah.
So
look at Bob's first coaching staff at Oklahoma. It's full of guys that went on to be pretty good head coaches, good, known to be offensive and defensive minded guys, and like we're great for the time. And then that's kind of what BB is trying to do. We never really saw that with Lincoln Riley, and maybe he'll do it at SC. But while at Oklahoma, you never really heard of guys that were on the staff being interviewed for other positions, for other roles at other schools. Like even Grinch, I know people hate him and have their thoughts on him, but he did take Oklahoma from being one of the worst, literally statistically, one of the worst defenses in college football history. I think it was the worst the season that he after he took over, to being an okay defense. Never great, but they were okay. Clearly we're improving from that, but you would think that if he took an Oklahoma from absolute shit to decent, someone would want to take him away. No one's really ever done that. Even USC fans want to try to get rid of him, and Lincoln just wants to keep him around.
Yeah. And I looked up Mason Fine's stats for anyone that doesn't know. He played as a true freshman at North Texas and didn't have a terrific year. But in his career, he played 4 years, and he threw for 12,237 yards, 91 touchdowns in Latrell's offense. So pretty good. He can drop a play. He can call a game, and that's at North Texas. So obviously, you move up. It's levels to this basically, but he knows what he's doing. I think he'd be a slam dunk hire if you can get him in and pay him some good money and convince him to stay around for another year or two, and maybe he's the OC in the long run. So moving on to the last topic, but before we could do that, be sure, if you're watching this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And if you already are subscribed, be sure to like the video and do the comment on the video whenever Jose gives you the end of video challenge. Helps us out a lot. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. It helps us as well. So moving on to the last guy, as I hinted to earlier, a 2025 defensive back, Hilton Stubbs, put Oklahoma in his top four. And this top four consisted of, obviously, Oklahoma, consisted of Tennessee. I'm trying to confirm because now I'm blanking. I knew two of the four real quick. So let me just double check. He put OU, Tennessee, Michigan, and Florida State in his top four. He's from Orange Park, Florida, 6'2", 185-pound safety. He's played his freshman year and sophomore year on the defense. He's totaled between his freshman and sophomore. He played in all 10 games of both seasons. He's totaled for 135 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss. He's had a total of 4 interceptions. So a guy that obviously has talent. He's playing varsity as a true freshman, or not a true freshman. Gosh, it's high school. Playing as a freshman, playing as a sophomore. Now he's class of 25, so he doesn't, he can't sign till December of 2024. He's already trying to narrow it down. But the fact that Oklahoma is in this race, he's from the state of Florida. We're competing against the big dogs, going head to head. I think this speaks well to Brandon Hall. What do you think?
I agree. That's what I was going to bring up. Brandon Hall is quickly showing that he is one of the best recruiters on the staff. The pair of him and Jay Valai are juggernauts. I mean, they were able to pull off Peyton Bowen in the last cycle. They got Makari Vickers. They got Jacoby Johnson. It's very talented defensive backs. So, what is left to be seen, I think, is the improvements that they'll make on the field. But on the recruiting trail, they are, I think it's not an argument. They are one of the best recruiters when it comes to getting defensive backs. And Brandon Hall is making a name for himself on the recruiting trail. If it continues and he's not a guy that gets poached from Oklahoma, wouldn't surprise me if he becomes a co-defensive coordinator for Oklahoma along with like Bates or Chavis. I think Valai might get the nod first because he's technically the passing game coordinator right now. So it would make sense for him to get that promotion, quicker overhaul. But either one of those guys, you can't go wrong. And if they're still here in like 2 or 3 years, I think Oklahoma is doing an amazing job of paying their coaches and making sure that they don't leave, because just recruiting wise, both of those guys are doing great things for OU. And I'm sure come next offseason, if they're still doing it for the 2024 class, which I would bet that they will be doing it, they might be coaching elsewhere as defensive coordinators or head coaches.
Oh, I would agree. And it's one of those things that it would suck to lose them, but I mean, they're recruiting at a high level. I think we're going to see the play of the defensive backs rise. I'd agree with you. Anytime you get thrown in the top 4, top 5, top 75, I mean, it's a good thing for Oklahoma. I'd be curious if, what his timeline is. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I think Oklahoma, if Oklahoma's a spot, I think Oklahoma's not going to take his commitment because they're going to make him want to go look elsewhere and confirm everything. But I guess if he's ready to shut it down, maybe Oklahoma does take a commitment in the 25 class that early. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of uncharted territories, obviously with the staff being there only for a year and a few months. We're figuring this out. So it'll be interesting to see if he's going to commit in the summertime or something, if Oklahoma is open to it and taking the commitment. I would like to think they would, but I guess we'll find out. So, do you have any final thoughts or end of video challenge or anything?
Let's go to the end of video challenge. Tomorrow, it's Friday. And it's All-Star Weekend. I don't really know who watches it. I'm going to watch the 3-point contest. So let's just kind of keep it to football. Who are you the most excited about of the early enrollees to watch play in the spring game? Let's just keep it close. I'm going to go with Deshaun just because I also think he's going to have a big impact in the fall. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly he's learned this playbook and how much time he'll play and how the defense is going to be with him on the field.
Yeah, I think PJ Adebawore. I was thinking Deshaun as well. I got to get a little different, but PJ Adebawore, honestly, anyone on the defense. I don't really care too much about the offense. The offense is going to be fine. I know it had its ups and downs too, but overall it was pretty good. I think PJ for me. So made it this far. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, and Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And we'll catch you guys next time.